Good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode 7 of Q&A with Dr. A. Man, I'm excited that you're here tonight. We are streaming this live, and I'm thrilled that questions keep coming in, and we are getting some really hot topics. We're going to discuss those tonight. So buckle in as we sit back and kind of blow your mind with natural answers to your health questions. Don't forget, if you are just joining us, we've been doing this broadcast stream every single Thursday at 7 o'clock. So if you scroll down, underneath somewhere on this page will be an opportunity for you to check our previous episodes and also to submit your questions. Remember, you are the script writer for this show. As you submit them, we answer them and we record them and send them out live to everybody on the internet. So let's take a deep dive tonight and begin. First question says, I listened to your previous episode. I've been doing some fermenting of vegetables. Seems like grew some mold in mine. Frustrated, had to dump it all out. What's going on? So I want to talk about this. Of course, mold is a big issue whenever you're growing things naturally. And there's a couple things you can do to prevent mold from forming in fermented foods. And the way you do that is by making sure the food that you're fermenting, if it's cabbage or carrots or celery or beets, is below the water line. Because if it's above the water line, then what will happen is it gets exposed to the air. And there's naturally occurring molds and things like that inside of all air, including the indoor air. And so what we want to do is make sure it's below that. You can actually get what's called a fermenting disc. It's a little tiny weight that basically fits inside of a mason jar and actually will push the food down so that it's below the water line. So that's kind of a classic number one thing to do to watch out for molds. And something interesting I wanted to point out to you guys, in case you're like, man, I really want to eat this stuff, but I'm getting frustrated with how hard it is, or you're hitting a step in the fermentation process. There's a company that makes something called Farmhouse Cultures. You can buy this at Fresh Market and Earth Fare, Healthy Home Market, etc., Whole Foods. But this is great stuff because this isn't pickled. This is already pre-fermented, ready to go. In fact, they have something that they call the Fermentovent, which is basically a small hole in this that lets the natural air come out. So this is still alive and living and cultured and ready to go. This one, by the way, is horseradish leek. This one over here is their classic sort of dill garlic pickle. And this one over here is a caraway. Again, these are all fermented cabbage products that are living, alive, and ready to go in case you do a fermentation process and you run into a bit of a problem. So I'll just answer it short and sweet. Keep the food below the water line. Make sure you're putting some sort of lid on top of it, using a sterile process as much as you can, and that usually takes care of the mold. Next question says, my doctor has suggested that my kids' tonsils come out. I've heard you recommend that it's not a good idea. Can you explain more why? Well, first of all, the biggest reason for that is I'm not a big fan of taking organs out of your body. You have tonsils for a reason, and so if we remove them, you're going to lack that reason. So let's answer this question by going over some of what your tonsils do for you. They are primarily a lymphatic tissue that is part of your immune system. In fact, there was a study done in the Netherlands where they compared children whose tonsils had been removed to children whose tonsils remained, and they wanted to see how many doctor's visits were had by those sets of children. The kids that had their tonsils taken out had to see doctors more often for colds and flus and sicknesses than the ones that had them left in. And we now know, according to the Ohio State University study, that your tonsils actually secrete something that's known as a T cell. It's a portion of your immune system, and T cells are part of the regulatory process. They go around and activate immune cells. We used to think they were only secreted by the thymus gland, which is the small gland that sits right about here on your chest. But we now know that your tonsils in your mouth actually secrete a pre-deactivated form of T cells. And so if you take your tonsils out, you lose your T cell production, you lose the ability for your immune system to work, and in the long run, you can create more issues than if you leave them in. So because they are a naturally occurring regulatory immune process, my first question would be, why does your doctor want to take them out? The classic reason is because they're getting infected frequently. So rather than just taking out the infected tissue so that the infection doesn't happen, maybe we should ask the question instead of, why are the tonsils constantly getting infected? That is usually, to me, a sign of a weakened immune system. So I think structurally there may be something wrong with the nerves in the neck that control the tonsils. I think that there may be a diet that's awfully high in sugar and grains and processed foods. And I also think of the idea that maybe there's some missing minerals and nutrients. Remember, zinc is crucial for normal immune function. So if this child is zinc deficient, neurologically stressed out and is eating toxic foods like most children are today, that may be the real cause, not the fact that the tonsils need to be removed. Next question says, are there foods that help or liquids that can help to increase bladder function? Frequent urination is a problem that I struggle with. So let's kind of digest this apart. First, frequent urination is an issue that affects a lot of people. It's not just going often, it's the idea that it interrupts your day or your sleep at night. So let's look at some things we can do on a liquid basis. First, we can remove liquids that stimulate frequent urination. Caffeine is a big one. Another thing is anything that's a diuretic, meaning that it would enhance urinary secretion, can actually do that. So tea is also, coffee's a big one. And believe it or not, even like chocolates and certain medications can induce higher rates of urinary production. So if you're a frequent urinator, what we want to do is stop drinking caffeine in black teas and coffees. Make sure you're cutting your diuretics down if you're taking that sort of a thing. And also look into like reducing naturally diuretic foods. Again, chocolate is a big one for that. The only challenge is chocolate's also very healthy if you're eating it in a raw state. So you may lose some benefits for a period of time. Another thing that's really big that stimulates urinary production is anything artificial. Think about this. Your urinary system is there to remove toxins from your liquid systems. So your blood will carry artificial sweeteners, toxins, whatever you're eating that's toxic inside of it. So the kidney, if it's water soluble, will pull it and then excrete it. So if you have a lot of water soluble toxins, you'll be urinating more often. So we want to, of course, remove any sort of water-soluble toxins. One of the most dangerous toxic water-soluble thing you can use is prescription medications. So that's number one. Try to figure out how to get off those if you're taking them. And number two would be artificial sweeteners. So the blue, the yellow, the pink packets and things to that effect. You can also do something where you can strengthen your urinary bladder itself. There is a process known as Kegel exercises. In essence, it's that sort of bearing down sensation. Think of it like if you're urinating and you want to stop your stream right there, that contraction is a Kegel. And so it's been said and actually shown that if you do Kegels frequently throughout the day, you can strengthen your bladder, which will help you to hold more, because a lot of times it's just poor pelvic floor structure, weak pelvic floor muscles, so your bladder will naturally open and drain more frequently. Something that's kind of fun to do if you're watching, a TV show or something to that effect, every single time there is a commercial, for the 2 minutes of the commercials, or 3 or however many, just sit there and do those Kegel contractions. Your average 30-minute show will have you doing close to 1,000 contractions. You'll have an extremely strong pelvic floor by the end of your favorite episode on a weekly basis. There are no commercials during our show, so you can't do it right now. Lastly, of course, I don't know your health status or anything to that effect, but you could lose some weight, possibly, because the more abdominal fat you have, the more it pushes your viscera, including your organs, like your large intestine, small intestine, and other tissues down onto the bladder. And any sort of pressure on the bladder can stimulate that regulatory sense neurologically that makes your bladder say to your brain, I've got to go. So you may not actually have to be going as often if you can decrease the stimulation. There are even some studies that show chiropractically if you have neurological irritation to the L1 and L2 nerve roots, that can create an overactive bladder because, again, the signal's being sent too rapidly, and what we can do is slow it down by decompressing the nerve. So hopefully that helps. Next question says, I find myself dealing with constipation. It's a constant struggle. I've tried everything, including the different laxatives. Nothing seems to be working. What can be done naturally for constipation? Again, it's a huge issue. We don't really like to talk about it a lot, but if you're not letting your waste go, it tends to pile up on the inside and can cause a lot of toxicity and a lot of issues. Constipation is probably, in my opinion, one of the number one reasons why most of us are tired and fatigued and sort of just cranky all the time. Because if we're constantly absorbing toxins from our stool, it leads to that just generalized stress within the body. So a couple things you can do, obviously, would be let's use some more natural methods of laxatives instead of chemical-based laxatives. Believe it or not, coconut oil and MCT oil is extremely soothing to the intestine, and it can induce some movement. So you do have to take quite a bit of it. Normally we recommend 1 to 2 tablespoons of coconut or MCT oil daily just for the generalized health benefits of what these oils do. But if you're somebody who's struggling with constipation, you could potentially take a tablespoon every single hour on the hour until things start to move through. And that might take 3 or 4 or 5 hours, but at least it's better than a chemical-based laxative. Something else you can consider is to increase your electrolytes. So we need certain electrolytes and minerals to cause contractions of the intestines to get the stool out. So you may be deficient in some of your base level minerals, vitamins, or nutrients. Something that works really, really well is actually to drink a very thick lemon water, kind of lemonade. So think of it as, instead of juicing the lemon and getting the lemon extract, you actually juice the entire lemon, seeds and skin and all. You'll get sort of a milky white substance that you can dilute 50-50 with water, and then you can actually add some electrolytes to it. I'm a big fan of a liquid electrolyte called Elite. It's basically a concentrated form of sodium and potassium and chlorine and magnesium, and you just simply put about a capful of that into the glass you're about to drink, and we drink that entire 50-50 lemon water and lemon juice mix. It stimulates the digestive system. It can help things to get moving. Something else you can do, it's been shown actually, is just start moving, exercise more than what you're currently doing. You know, usually if we have animals that haven't gone to the bathroom frequently, like especially with number 2, trying to get stools out, usually if you take them for a long walk, you'll find all of a sudden they're going 3, 4, 5 times. It's because movement of the body can stimulate movement of the organs, which of course can help with constipation. So maybe simply just going for a longer walk or doing some sort of like high intense, low duration exercise like Max T3 or these burst style exercises can get things moving within your gut. And lastly, you might try to just bump your fiber up, but not your classic fibers, like eating grains and using oats and things to that effect, which can have some damaging effect to the intestines. Try things that are more like the soluble fibers that come from your greens and also some from your vegetables. A great way to get some really good nutrients in with that would be things like prunes, which would be dried plums, apricots, which of course are dried nectarines, and things to that effect are really, really great. If it's a dried food product that's been dehydrated to some effect, it tends to help the body because it's increasing the fiber component by sucking some of the water out. So again, plums and apricots and berries and raisins, those can help to get things moving along. Lastly, if you want to do this, if you need like an immediate need, of course, any version of an enema can help greatly with getting things to move. You can do coffee enemas, you can do saline enemas, you can even do things like garlic water enemas. Enemas are a really great way to introduce a kind of soothing liquid into the abdominal cavity and kind of pulse it around, slosh your guts around to then get things to naturally start moving. So hopefully that helps with the constipation question. Next question says, I've been reading about the positive effects of kava to prevent cancer. You've never mentioned kava before. What's your take on it? So let's talk a little bit about kava or kava, which is basically some pretty interesting stuff. It's a naturally occurring, herb/plant that generally is found in the South Pacific. And what's kind of wild is when you look at the South Pacific as a whole, they have a very low cancer rate, yet they have a very high smoking rate. And so we may look at this as kind of like, it's kind of interesting. They consume more of this plant naturally. It's naturally there, yet they have a low cancer rate when it comes to lung cancer with high smoking. So maybe the naturally occurring kava is helping with that. There's definitely something worth looking into on it. Kava has also some extremely calming properties. It can help with anxiety. It helps people to relax. What's unique about it, though, is it has the ability to kind of make the brain basically relax. So in essence, what may be happening is why kava has such a good effect towards what I'll call kind of natural cancer fighting properties is because it induces a generalized state of relaxation, which can help things to calm down. Many times, cancers are coming from hormonal imbalance that is caused by stress. It's also caused by viral infections a lot of the times. So it's better and more important to just say, well, let's throw kava at this to find the cause. So if you've got cancer, make sure you're finding out, is it a hormonal-based cancer? Is it a viral-based cancer? Is it a stress-based cancer? And once we find the cause of what the cancer is, now you can start approaching a cure. The challenge and why I don't talk a lot about kava is it's also extremely toxic to the liver. So if you're using it as natural supplementation, what often will happen with patients that have cancer is they'll say, well, if this is good, I'm going to take a lot of it. Because of course, when we get cancer, we want to do everything we can to try to fight that back. And what can happen is you can actually damage your liver in the process. I'm a bigger fan of using something that's naturally occurring, that is much more scientific studies behind the effectiveness towards cancer with very limited side effects. In fact, I haven't yet to date found a side effect of this natural anti-cancer agent, which is CBD oil or cannabidiol oil. There are hundreds of studies showing the effectiveness of CBD oil with its anti-cancerous properties, and it actually has almost no negative side effects in regards to the liver, to the body itself. So for me personally, if you're gonna do kava kava, do some research, find out what kind of tumor it is, if it's a viral-based tumor, or if it's a hormone-based tumor, and then let's play around with some other alternatives instead of doing, kava kava. Next question asks, can we actually do something instead of using synthetic hormones when we have had, like, say, a hysterectomy or we're having hormonal issues? The biggest component of this question is, what's the take behind bioidentical hormones? Now, this is a loaded question. We could, in theory, do an entire 30-minute segment on hormone disturbance, bioidenticals, and natural replacements for certain hormones. The biggest thing to understand is this. I like bioidenticals, but I also don't like them. The number one issue with bioidenticals is they're just treating the condition like a drug. If you have hormone imbalance, let's, rather than just giving you the hormones that you're low in to make the numbers look good, make your lab tests look good, find out why they are imbalanced and fix that, and then your body will naturally rebalance the hormones for you. If you are taking hormones though, bioidenticals are by far 1,000 times better than taking the more synthetic versions or the traditional hormone replacement therapy versions of hormones. You have to understand this, hormones are extremely powerful. The tiniest amount of hormone makes a massive effect within the body. So generally, if you give yourself even the slightest bit of hormone, you can throw off the entire hormone cascade. And that's why I'm not a big fan of using even bioidentical hormones. For me, I'd rather get to the true cause of it. If you want to check out some more information, I did an entire segment on how to balance hormones naturally, and you can find that on our website, AskDrErnst.com, under the health news section. Just Google, use the search tab at the top, and type in hormones, and you'll find the video. It'll pop straight up. So let's talk about some things you can do naturally to balance your hormones. First, intermittent fasting has been shown to drastically balance your hormones naturally. So it doesn't matter what hormone is out of balance. It could be insulin, it could be progesterone, it could be estrogen, it could be testosterone. When you intermittently fast and you get your ketone levels up, your hormones naturally rebound back. In fact, they've done some studies that show that various hormones can even be 1 to 2 to 3,000 times higher when you actually intermittently fast. Partly what happens is it helps to regulate your hormone response. So you have a hormone and you have the receptor. The hormone has to land on the receptor to get the response. It may not be that the hormone is the issue, it may be that it's the receptor that's the issue, and what intermittent fasting does is it helps to fix the receptors. So that's step number one. Number two would be to understand that most hormones are made from fats, either cholesterol as a backer or fat as a backer. So if your diet is low in your essential fats, which would be your 3, 6, and 9s, then you could throw your hormones completely out of balance just simply because of that. Remember, the biggest challenge is most of us eat way too much omega-6. Those are the ones that are found in grains and corn and rice and soy and things to that effect. And we really are usually too low in the omega-3s and the omega-9s, which are found in grass-fed meats and free-range chicken, wild-caught fish, even the various seeds like flax and hemp, and coconuts and those sorts of products, avocado, etc. So I'm a bigger fan of making sure that you're bumping your fats up and intermittently fasting to boost your hormones naturally. Next, what we can do is again find out if they're fat-based, then let's eat lots and lots of fats. My favorite fats for balancing hormones are coconut, avocado, and MCT oil. Flax is also really good, but it has to be refrigerated, and so a lot of people tend to not let it stay refrigerated long enough, and it can turn on you and go bad. Flax also has kind of a pretty unique taste, and most people can't handle it if you're taking 2 or 3 or 4 tablespoons of flax directly. MCT oil is almost tasteless. Coconut oil, of course, has a slight coconut taste, but actually is pretty good, and you can eat it directly. Another thing that's kind of new that I've been researching into that helps with balancing hormones is actually earthing. What's unique about earthing is they've done studies that show if you earth yourself properly, which I'll talk about in a moment, you can balance cortisol, you can get your hormones back on track again, and it's actually a way to naturally stabilize unbalanced hormones. What earthing is, it's a generalized concept of you letting your body actually physically touch the earth. Now, we're an electrical battery. We basically have tons of energy flowing through us. We generate energy all the time. and we have chemical reactions. It's been estimated that there's approximately 8 times 10 to the 26. Just do the math on this. 8 with 26 zeros behind it, chemical reactions occurring in your body every single day. Anytime there's a chemical reaction, there's always waste products, either free radicals or ions or anything that would be kind of damaging to the human body. What earthing has been shown to do is the earth is a huge magnet, and it has the ability to pull ionic energy from your body to remove the negative ions that you have accumulated inside of you. So just like when you rub your socks on the floor and then you touch something metal and a static discharge comes across you, you do need to discharge some energy occasionally. When you start to have too much free radicals and too much ionic energy, it plays around with hormone balance. So what earthing is basically saying, figure out how on a daily basis to get your feet or some portion of your body, your hands or your skin, to touch the earth directly so you can discharge this energy. Some of the studies show it can happen as fast in 10 to 15 minutes. The challenge is we all walk around with either sandals on or shoes on, or we're standing on concrete floors, or our houses are built on some sort of a subfloor base that's elevated off the ground. More than likely, you haven't touched the earth in weeks. You may think you have, but you haven't actually physically touched the dirt or sand or something to that effect. So if you find it difficult, because like me, you're in some sort of office environment all day, if you go to a website by just simply typing into Google earthing, there's a company that makes some products that can help you to earth yourself regularly, one of which is an earthing pad. It simply plugs into the grounding port of any plug you have in your office or your house, and you can actually stand on this pad barefoot, and it will discharge the ionic energy out through the grounding port. More importantly, and what I do and I recommend for everybody, is getting what's known as an earthing sheet. It's actually a fitted sheet that fits onto your bed. You're going to sleep 6 to 8 hours every night anyway. Why not connect yourself to the earth every night when you sleep? The sheet has either silver fibers or some sort of metallic fibers woven into it, and again, it has a little plug that you can plug into the grounding port of your house, and when you're sleeping at night, your arms, your hands, your feet, your legs are touching that fitted sheet, and you're discharging your energy. There have been multiple studies that show it helps to balance not only your cortisol levels, but other hormones when you earth yourself every single night. Hopefully that helps with the balancing hormone question. Next question says, why is gluten so bad, and what is gluten anyway? Here's the thing. Gluten is a protein that's found in a lot of grains. And what's happened is this. The protein itself is there to support the structure of the seed and basically to be a food source for the germination process. So if you have a seed you plant in the ground, you add water to it, it sprouts. When it sprouts, the seed is eating the gluten component behind it. So the plant itself will be gluten-free, but the seed is what actually contains gluten. And a lot of times the seeds we eat are things like corn and rice and grains and things to that effect. When we look at what gluten does, a lot of us have eaten gluten that's come from either a hybridized or genetically modified grain source, be it wheat or corn or rice or whatever. When you eat hybridized or genetically modified gluten, we don't really have processes and enzymes that will denature that protein and make it safe for us because it's been genetically altered. So when gluten gets into your system, it does something unique. It'll actually, like a virus, bind to the cell and activate this process known as a zonulin product. Zonulin is a little tiny protein that gets in and actually separates the space between the cells of your digestive system. So think about this for a minute. You have this really tight-knit filter that's job is to keep waste and products and large proteins and things from getting back into your blood. When gluten lands on the cell, it stimulates this zonulin process and the cells start to split apart and we get these little tiny holes and we increase the permeability. This is what is known as leaky gut. When you have large holes in your intestines, bacteria, viruses, and proteins can leak across and get back from the stool components back into the blood. When that happens, your body will build an autoimmune response to it because, of course, large proteins, toxins, and waste products, viruses, and bacteria are not supposed to be entering back into the bloodstream. The long-term effect of this is that it creates an autoimmune response. So gluten and grain consumption has been directly linked to an increased likelihood of you having a leaky gut, which has been linked to an increased likelihood of having autoimmune conditions. So what is gluten? It's a protein found in almost every grain that can cause damage to the intestines, that can lead to an autoimmune condition. So why is it so bad for us? Because it's been estimated that between 80 to 90% of us are gluten sensitive, meaning that if you eat gluten, that process is happening and you won't feel it. In fact, the number one sign of having a leaky gut is just tired, fatigue, weight gain, and usually kind of foggy mental process, because your gut is directly connected to your brain. There's this new concept called your gut brain. It's the idea that your digestive health is directly connected to your mental health. So if you're having concentration issues, you're having difficulty remembering things, or you're slurring your words, or you're going, where did I leave this, or what was I saying, I just completely forgot, that's actually a sign that your intestines are starting to potentially shut down on you. That's why gluten is so dangerous and why it needs to be avoided. Now the big challenge though becomes, some people are literally physically allergic to it, where it causes severe damage to the intestines. So you can have, irritation and ulcers and colitis and things to that effect. Those are our classic sort of celiac patients, and they need to remove it completely. But I'm a firm believer that the majority of us are actually sensitive to gluten, and the only way to find out is to remove it from your diet for a period of time, and then when you consume it again, if you get a reaction, if you get bloating, if you get constipation, you get diarrhea or something, then more than likely you're sensitive to it. So it's really good for a period of time to say I'm going grain-free. Also remember, a lot of grains are where we get our extra carbohydrates from. We want to try to cut those down at all times. Next question says, how much water should I drink? Here's the thing. The standard answer is you should take about half your body weight in ounces. So if you weigh 160 pounds, it would be about 80 ounces per day. But again, remember, that's just the recommendation on replacing what you typically urinate out. So if you're drinking 80 ounces to replace the 80 ounces that came out, you're at a net of 0. Most of us, though, are dehydrated. So you generally need to drink more than half your body weight if you want to start to replenish and get your liquids back in. One thing to note is that you can drink too much water. If you get to the point of like 2 or 3 or 4 gallons a day, your kidneys are going to kick into overdrive to keep you in homeostatic stasis with your water components. So what you want to do is make sure that you're probably staying somewhere around 80 ounces if you weigh 160 pounds to about a gallon. Generally speaking, for most adults, a gallon a day is a great way to replenish your basic needs, but also to rehydrate. I'm also a big fan that when you drink water, adding a very small amount of either Celtic or sea salt, Himalayan salt to it, because it has major benefits with boosting your basic minerals and also detoxifying the body. Last question for tonight says, I don't have celiac disease, but every time I eat bread, my stomach upsets me. What's going on? We sort of answered this in the beginning, but you may have a gluten sensitivity. The challenge with this is this. Even if you get things like upset stomach, acid reflux, indigestion, bloating, constipation, whenever you eat any type of food, that is a subtle indication that there's a severe digestive system issue. It could be you have irritable bowel. It could be that there's some sort of sensitivity to a food that you're eating. And the classic foods that most people are sensitive to is dairy, wheat, and certain carbohydrates like types of sugars. So when we're looking at somebody who says, when I eat bread, my stomach gets upset, chances are you have a gluten sensitivity. So what I would highly suggest is, for a short period of time, remove all grains, including all breads, find out how well you are, and then test it. Eat a piece of toast, or eat a whole grain, bagel, or something just for once to see what happens. If you find out immediately afterwards you get some sort of a reaction, your nose is running, you get bloated, you get a lot of constipation, then it's a classic sign that you have a sensitivity to either gluten or to the grains themselves. This is also a great way to check and see if your body is sensitive to some sort of a food. Whenever you pull a food from you for a period of time, what happens is you usually calm down the immune response. And then if you reintroduce it, if you're having an immune response to it, instantly you'll get a reaction back. It is a great, simple way to find out if you are sensitive to certain foods and to know what you should not be eating. Guys, thanks so much for joining me tonight. Don't forget, every single Saturday at 3 o'clock, you can join me for the Ask Dr. Ernst show, which is on 11:10 a.m. here in Charlotte and broadcasted across the nation on WBT.com. Don't forget to visit our website, AskDrErnst.com. We have protocols, we have free downloads, we have a lot of health tips and information that's great. And as always, I look forward to seeing you each and every week, Thursday at 7 for the Q&A with Dr. A. Thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next week.